David Durham, and I'm a partner with the law firm of Barnes & Thornburg. I have over 15 years of in-house and private practice experience dealing with healthcare professionals and business and real estate transactions. Thad Miller with DDS Match has asked me to talk to you a little bit today about real estate as it's involved in the sale of a dental practice. Probably the easiest way to start is just to talk about it from both sides of the transaction. For sellers, you have a couple of different options. First, the easiest transaction is where the selling dentist is involved in a straight lease transaction with an owner of the real estate. That transaction is relatively simple. It involves an assignment of the existing lease to the buying dentist and usually can be negotiated very quickly, as the landlord will be happy to have an ongoing tenant relationship with the purchasing dentist. The second is where the selling dentist owns the real estate. And here is where you're going to have several options available to you. The first is where the selling dentist merely just wants to dispose of the real estate in connection with the sale of the practice. And the easiest way to do that, obviously, is the sale of that real estate to the acquiring dentist. It's a relatively simple transaction. It is closed simultaneously with the sale of the practice, and otherwise just involves a few documents that again close simultaneously with the closing of the sale of the practice. The second is really where either the dentist decides that he or she wants to stay in the real estate after the sale of the practice, or the more likely scenario is the purchasing dentist does not have the financial resources available at the time to acquire the real estate in connection with the acquisition of the practice. In that situation, the best option for the selling dentist is to prepare a lease, and that lease can take a number of forms. It can be a straight lease where the dentist will sit in the role of the landlord, the acquiring dentist will be the tenant, and he or she will have that real estate for as long as you choose, and you will collect rent pursuant to the terms of the lease. Oftentimes, however, purchasing dentists are in a situation where they will at some point want to acquire the real estate. And so in that situation, you're really looking at more of a hybrid lease situation where you're going to have a lease and it's going to have an option to purchase in it. And that option to purchase will be triggered either by a written notice from the acquiring dentist, or it will be a timed event where at, say, year 2, 3, 5, or 10 in the existing lease, the acquiring dentist will have an option to provide written notice to you, and at that point they will acquire the real estate for the practice based upon a prearranged term. So that term might be market price. That market price would be determined by a real estate broker or other real estate professional who would survey the existing market at the time of the exercise of that option to purchase, and they would arrive at that price and present it to the party, and that would be the price at which you would sell the real estate. The other way to do it is to have a stated price in the future, that at year 2 the property would sell for X price, at year 3 it would sell for Y price, and on with essentially the purchase price determined at the time you execute the lease. The third option available to you is a lease with a put option. And that, for a selling dentist, may be the best scenario because you can coordinate the amount of time that you want to be involved in the real estate. So if an acquiring dentist doesn't have the financial resources available at the time they're acquiring the practice, or you've decided that you'd like to have a stream of revenue post the sale of the practice, you can time that with the acquiring dentist through a lease with a put option. Essentially what we would do is we would prepare a lease, and that lease would have either triggering dates or a period of time in which you could give the existing tenant notice, whether it be 60, 180, or even a year, at which point that tenant would need to find the financial resources to acquire the asset from you, or to acquire the real estate from you based upon the agreed upon terms in the lease. But I think between the existing lease assignment, the straight sale of the real estate, and then the 3 different lease options that you have available to you, there are a number of ways in which we can approach the real estate asset in connection with the sale of the dental practice. If you're a acquiring dentist, you're essentially facing these same issues, and a selling dentist on the other side is either going to present different terms to you, or you may be able to propose the best terms that you're looking for that best suit your situation. Again, an assignment of the lease may be the existing situation where the dentist that you're buying the practice from doesn't own the real estate. A very simple process, as we described earlier. Similarly, with the acquisition of the real estate in connection with the acquisition of the practice, a relatively simple transaction and is easy to close simultaneously with the purchase of the practice. The three lease options are then become the most interesting for a dentist who is acquiring a practice, because those are where you're going to have to accommodate the selling dentist for the most part, because you're not able to acquire the real estate when you acquire the practice. And in those situations, you're just going to want to make sure that you consult with somebody. Of course, we suggest an attorney, and really learn about the different ways that you can approach the lease and what will work best for your situation and for your practice as you envision it 2, 3, 5, even 10 years out. Now, having discussed all of those options for a seller and a buyer, one of the things that both parties need to consider is that in a lease situation, whether it be the straight lease, the lease with an option to purchase, or the lease with a put option, the dentist who sits in the role of the landlord always has the right, unless you agree otherwise in the lease, to market the property. This certainly offers a number of advantages to a dentist who has sold their practice, decided to stay in the real estate for whatever reason, but at some point decides that they want to exit that asset, sell it off, take that revenue and go do something else with it. That option is typically available to them unless they've agreed in advance that they won't market that property. Again, that's relatively unusual, but certainly something that can be discussed when the lease is being negotiated. For the buyer, keep in mind that if you have an option to purchase in that lease, or there's a put option in that lease, there's nothing that really changes in your situation other than who your landlord is. So it may be that the selling dentist is no longer the landlord, but you've got somebody else, typically somebody who is experienced in real estate, who understands their rights and obligations under the lease to provide you the various services that are set forth in that lease. But I think you can expect the relationship to be very similar with what you had with the dentist who you acquired the practice from, if he or she had stayed on as the landlord. So kind of just to wrap that issue up, I think the only issue to understand is that so long as there is a lease in place, that real estate is typically still very marketable and may be sold prior to an option to purchase or a put option being exercised. Those options do not go away, so those would still exist in the future, but it does allow the selling dentist the flexibility to do what he or she wants to do with the real estate. So really, to kind of wrap things up, I think where real estate is involved in the sale of a dental practice, there are a number of options that exist that allow the purchasing dentist some flexibility on how he or she is going to ultimately be involved in that real estate, whether as a tenant or ultimately as an owner via a straight purchase, or ultimately by exercising an option to purchase or through a put option exercised by the seller. But in either event, I think we would recommend to both the selling dentist and the purchasing dentist that you involve a lawyer in the process. We'd certainly be happy to help you in that, but we would recommend that you speak with a lawyer, get some advice, and really tailor that real estate transaction to match up with how you envision that practice rolling out in the future, or from the seller's side, how best to deal with what your future plans are after you've sold the practice. Thank you.